The Hinterkaifeck murders remain, over a century later, one of the most gruesome and baffling unsolved crimes in European history. On March 31st, 1922, an entire family and their maid were slaughtered on a remote farmstead in Bavaria in ways so disturbing they continue to haunt criminologists and storytellers alike. The Gruber farm was super isolated, tucked away in a sea of forests and fields that stretched on forever, especially during those long winter months. You know, Andreas Gruber, the head of the family, had a reputation as a tough, bitter guy, and honestly, he wasn't winning any popularity contests with the neighbors. His wife, Cecilia, matched his stern demeanor, and together they created a pretty unwelcoming vibe. Living with them was their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, along with her two little ones, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Joseph. Victoria's life was anything but simple. It was rumored that her husband had died in World War I, but whispers around town suggested she had a few flings on the side, including with a local man named Lorenz Schlittenbauer. Talk about complicated. And then there was the juicy gossip surrounding little Joseph. People couldn't stop speculating about his paternity. Some said Lorenz was the dad, while darker tales hinted at a more disturbing truth, that Joseph might be the result of an incestuous relationship between Victoria and her own father, Andreas. Yikes. These swirling rumors really did a number on the family's reputation, making it easy for enemies to pop up left and right. In the weeks leading up to the horrific murders, Andreas shared some eerie stories with neighbors. He claimed he heard strange footsteps in the attic at night, but every time someone went to check, nothing was ever found. Keys would mysteriously vanish, doors that were locked suddenly stood wide open. And the previous maid had even packed up and left, saying she couldn't handle the haunting noises anymore. Just days before everything went down, Andreas spotted unfamiliar footprints in the snow leading from the dark forest straight to their home, but none going back. He brought this up to folks in town, but his gruff, paranoid reputation meant that most just shrug it off. On the evening of March 31st, someone lured the family members to the barn. Investigators later believed they had been drawn out one at a time, perhaps by strange noises, or maybe by the livestock being disturbed. Andreas was attacked first, his skull smashed with a mattock, a heavy farming tool. His wife Cecilia followed, then Victoria, and finally little Cecilia. The child's death was the most horrifying. She survived long enough after her skull was split open to tear chunks of her own hair out in agony before she died. The killer then entered the house. Baby Joseph was slaughtered in his crib, his skull crushed, and the maid Maria, who had only just arrived that very day to replace the one who had fled, was killed in her bed. The killer did not flee. For days, neighbors saw smoke rising from the Gruber's chimney. The animals were fed, the cows milked, the food stores replenished. Whoever had committed the crime stayed in that house, tending the farm, eating the family's meals, sleeping in the home of the dead. 6 corpses lay on the property while life at Hinterkaifeck continued, animated by a killer who treated the farm as his own. It took 4 days for anyone to investigate. The children had not appeared at school. The mail piled up. Visitors who stopped by found the house oddly silent, yet they swore they could see movements at the window. Finally, neighbors banded together and entered the property. What they found was a nightmare. The bodies in the barn, stacked and hidden beneath hay, their skulls split. Baby Joseph lay still in his blooded crib. Maria, the maid, was lifeless in her bed. The police were totally stumped right from the get-go. I mean, the brutality screamed rage, but the way the bodies were hidden. That was all about being smart, and then there's the killer just chilling at the farm afterward. Every suspect seemed legit, but proving anyone guilty, that was a whole different ball game. It was like a twisted puzzle with no clear pieces fitting together. The prime suspect was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the man rumored to be Joseph's father. He had a history with Victoria, and his relationship with Andreas was hostile. He was among the first neighbors to arrive at the crime scene, but his behavior unsettled everyone. He entered the house calmly, unlocking doors without keys, as though he already knew his way inside. He handled the bodies with strange detachment. Some said he even remarked that Joseph wasn't his responsibility anymore, which struck others as cold, almost rehearsed. Yet no evidence directly tied him to the murders. Others believed the culprit could have been a vagrant or transient worker, someone who found the farm, murdered the family, and used the isolated home as shelter before moving on. But if it was a stranger, how did they manage to remain in the attic without detection for days beforehand? And why linger after the murders? Some theorized it was more than practicality, that the killer had slipped into madness, compelled to stay close to the family even in death. There were more disturbing possibilities, too. Some investigators whispered about Victoria's supposedly dead husband. Records from the war were chaotic, and desertion was not uncommon. Could he have returned, enraged to find his wife with another man, her father rumored to be her child's? Had he murdered them all in a frenzy of betrayal? But this theory evaporated under scrutiny. No evidence ever suggested he lived past the war. The investigation stretched on, but the rural police lacked resources, and evidence was trampled by neighbors before it was even gathered. Rumors swirled. Some swore the killer was known to the family, explaining why the dogs had not barked. Others believed more than one person was involved, that the murders had required coordination. Forensic techniques of the 1920s were crude compared to today's, and crucial details were lost forever. One of the most chilling pieces of evidence, however, came from the barn itself. In the hay where the bodies were discovered, strands of little Cecilia's hair were clenched in her hands, proof she had lived for hours in unimaginable pain, lying beside her dead family before finally giving up. It cemented the murders not only as a crime, but as a tale of prolonged, agonizing terror. The farm was eventually demolished, but the memory of Hinterkaifeck lingered. People said the land was cursed. Others said Andreas had invited evil into his home by tolerating sin and secrecy. Modern researchers continue to pore over the case, but the truth remains locked away, entombed in the silence of that barn. The killer's identity died with the generation who lived it, leaving behind only speculation and unease. The Hinterkaifeck murders endure because they are more than just a killing. They are a puzzle with missing pieces, a story that shifts depending on who tells it. Was it vengeance, madness, lust, or chance? No one knows. What is certain is that someone walked into that lonely Bavarian farm in 1922, annihilated a family, and then, in a gesture more horrifying than the killings themselves, lived in their home, tended their animals, and ate their bread, as though he had always belonged there.